Friends, advocates, allies, our incredible members of Congress, we want to thank you all for being here. Today, we gather to remember, to mourn, to honor the anniversary of the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, a tragedy that still wounds us deeply. We grieve for more than 120,000 displaced souls, for those who have lost not only their homes, but their heritage, part of their culture, and even their lives. Yet, even in our mourning, we rise beyond sorrow. We stand here today because we refuse to accept injustice as the final word. We stand here today because we refuse to let silence be the answer to our suffering. It's often said that peace is born out of justice. So how can we, or anyone for that matter, hope for peace when justice remains denied? Azerbaijan's relentless actions against the people of Artsakh have been met with a deafening silence from much of the world. Most painfully, from this very country that we love, the United States. By failing to hold Azerbaijan accountable, by turning a blind eye to its aggression, the United States has sent an unmistakable message that some lives, some struggles, are deemed more worthy of our attention than others. And this is not just a political failure, it is a moral one. It is an issue at hand that transcends Artsakh. It strikes at the heart of what America claims to stand for: freedom, justice, human dignity. What good are those values if we allow the cries of the oppressed to go unheard? The consequence of this indifference are stark. Azerbaijan, emboldened by the world's silence, has continued to act with impunity. It is not satisfied with merely taking land. It seeks to erase an entire people, to erase a history, a culture, a soul. But no matter how brutal the campaign, no matter how deep the wound, no matter how visible the scars, we stand here to declare one truth: that Artsakh lives. Artsakh lives. Artsakh lives not just in our memories, but in our action and in our work. Artsakh lives in our relentless will to fight for justice. As long as we speak their names, as long as we fight for the recognition of these crimes, as long as we believe that justice is not merely an abstract ideal, but a tangible necessity for all of humanity, Artsakh lives. Artsakh is not gone because its spirit is alive in each and every member, in each and every person in this room. We are the voice for those who can no longer speak, a light that refuses to be extinguished. We are guardians of a cause as righteous as it is enduring. And in this fight, in this cause, there's hope. Hope because we are not alone. Hope because we refuse to be silenced. So let this be clear. Even though great powers and our diplomats and our state departments, maybe, we will not be reduced by fear. We will not be crushed by oppression, and we will not bow to the forces of tyranny. They say that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. What they often don't say is why it bends. It bends because we, through our struggle, our sacrifice, and our unyielding demand for truth, make it bend. Artsakh lives. Artsakh lives because Terhovanes, Goharin Stepanyan, Lala Abgaryan, Hermine Avakyan, Siranush Sarkisian, Marina Simonian, and Geram Stepanyan, who have been through hell and back, are today in the halls of power, making sure that the stories of their loved ones, making sure that the crimes that they've seen with their own eyes are heard throughout the world. No matter how painful it is to relive that experience, they are making sure that the voice of Artsakh is never silenced. Artsakh lives because advocates around the world, from California to Washington to Texas to Michigan to North Carolina to Illinois, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Tennessee, are here today to let the world know that Artsakh lives. Artsakh lives because we refuse to let it die. Artsakh also lives because we have incredible Artsakh also lives because we have incredible allies, some of whom are sitting right in front of me. Members of Congress who have relentlessly advocated for our cause as if it is their own. And I'm going to have them each come up and say a word. We're going to start from the great state of New York. Congresswoman Grace Meng, who has fought relentlessly for necessary aid for Artsakh refugees on the powerful Appropriations Committee, and is this year ANCA Eastern Region Freedom Recipient Award. Congresswoman.
Thank you for the kind introduction. It's amazing that so many people from all across the country are here, and I was able to meet the curator with my colleagues of this amazing and very touching exhibit. Thank you all for being here. I know it's not easy, but very important that you're here to bring the messages and the stories of many who cannot speak for themselves. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng from Queens, New York. Thank you to the, is that a cheer for Queens? It was usually for Brooklyn, so I'll take what I can. Thank you to the Armenian National Committee of America for bringing us together tonight. The Armenian people are no stranger to challenges. From the Armenian genocide 100 years ago to the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh just 1 year ago, your resilience has spanned centuries. I know that many of you in this room have family members and loved ones affected by this crisis. I also understand that we have people here who experienced last year's tragic events firsthand. As a member of our bipartisan Armenia caucus here in Congress, I'm here to say that we stand with you. We see what the Armenian people have faced. We see the challenges, and we're committed to working with you to address them head on. That means educating more people about the Armenian genocide. We must be vigilant against hatred, especially when it leads to violence. It means acknowledging Azerbaijan's ethnic cleansing of Artsakh and the intentional destruction of Armenian cultural, historical, and heritage sites. And importantly, it means making sure that Armenians who were forcibly displaced are compensated for their property without forfeiting their right to return to the place that they've called home for thousands of years. That's why I'm proud to announce my support for the Artsakh Revenue Recovery Act, which will hold Azerbaijan accountable for its destruction of the Armenian community in Artsakh, and finally create a way to hopefully provide at least financial compensation to our refugees. Thank you all for being here tonight. I stand with you against Azerbaijan's aggression, and I and my colleagues are committed to working with you to make sure that the lessons of our past are not forgotten. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The next member of Congress, I'm a little biased because I'm California, and she happens to be one of our strongest champions. Congresswoman Judy Chu, who represents one of the largest Armenian communities in California, and one of the few members of Congress who's been to Artsakh, for which she's been banned from entering Azerbaijan, which I'm sure the Congresswoman looks at as a badge of honor. And Aliyev thinks he's tough, but I think Congresswoman Chu's much tougher. Congresswoman.
Hello. Yes, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 28th Congressional District, and I'm proud to represent the nation's oldest Armenian community in Pasadena, California. I want to thank the Armenian National Committee of America and all the Armenian Americans who've traveled from all over the country to Washington, D.C. to make your voices heard. This is a very critical anniversary for Armenia and the future of the Armenian people in the region and around the world. Last fall, I was horrified to witness Azerbaijan follow up on its illegal blockade of Artsakh with yet another violent attack that drove 120,000 Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh from their ancestral homeland. We have to be clear, the United States must reject this violence and ethnic cleansing and stand up clearly for democracy, self-determination, and peace. I have looked around at this photo exhibit with the photographs from David Garamanian, and it brought back memories of the time that I had the privilege of visiting Artsakh in person. Before I left on this trip, the Azerbaijani government warned me that Artsakh was dangerous and making this visit would be consequential. But I still went, and I am so glad I did because I have those memories of Artsakh being beautiful and charming. And I could clearly see this was an Armenian community and that it was full of Armenians that were thriving and proud. But sure enough, when I returned, Azerbaijan banned me from ever coming to their country. But considering what they did, I will not miss being banned, not going to their country, of course. And it only strengthened my resolve to advocate for the Armenian people. But that visit was in 2019, and it is heartbreaking to consider the people that I visited just 5 years ago are now refugees in Armenia. And just to see these photographs with this baby from a bombed out hospital is heartbreaking, moving, and sad. And to see all those cars jammed in that one roadway from Artsakh to Armenia makes me very sad. And then to see the bombed out churches, homes, and businesses is also so heartbreaking. So that's why I joined my Armenia Caucus colleagues in requesting robust federal funding in fiscal year 2025 that will support Armenia's democracy and aid in the defense of its borders, and also help to care for the 120,000 refugees from Artsakh. We requested a total of $30 million to increase defense cooperation between the U.S. and Armenia and provide education and training for its armed forces, as well as $200 million to support these refugees who were forced to flee their homeland in Artsakh, as well as $20 million to support reforms that will strengthen Armenia's democracy, internal security, and law enforcement. And of course, a prohibition on providing U.S. military and security assistance to Azerbaijan.
Thank you.
I will continue to work in Congress to stand up for Armenia's security and democracy and against Azerbaijan's unacceptable aggression. So thank you for your important work, and I look forward to continuing our work together to support Armenia and Artsakh.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next member of Congress is one of the newest members of Congress, but that hasn't stopped him from being one of the strongest voices and advocates for the Armenian people, including being a co-sponsor of House Resolution 7288, which calls to enforce a ban on military aid to Azerbaijan. The Congressman from the great state of Rhode Island, Congressman Gary Bamo.
Good evening, everyone. And I very much will be holding the refrain we heard earlier. It is something we have to affirm and state that Artsakh lives, and I'm grateful that will be with me beyond tonight. 5 months ago, just 5 months into being a member of Congress, I joined you to affirm 3 fundamental truths. Truths that are even more apparent on this day, on this solemn day of remembrance. 1, the freedom-loving people of Armenia deserve to live in peace and security, safe from the existential threats they face on their borders. 2, the region of Nagorno-Karabakh is the ancestral home of the Armenian people, Artsakh. And 3, we cannot and we will not be silent in the aftermath of Azerbaijan's brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing in Artsakh. Our dedication to human rights is ironclad. That's what everybody here in this room stands for. And tonight, we denounce the destabilizing threat that President Aliyev proposes to the region. We stand in solidarity with the journalists who have been threatened, the citizens who have been silenced, and we acknowledge the men, women, and children who have been forced to flee the only homes they've ever known. Know that I am your ally as we advocate for the Armenian people. I'm grateful to be a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Congressional Caucus on Armenia. I support efforts to strengthen the bilateral ties between our two nations. Most importantly, I support this vibrant organization, the ANC, that moves mountains in Congress as the representative of a proud Armenian American population in Rhode Island. And I see a lot of Rhode Islanders in here, so I just want to shout them out. Go Rhode Island. told, the biggest delegation here today. Smallest state, biggest delegation. And many of you know that the very first piece of legislation that I had the privilege of co-leading with another great member of Congress who you'll hear from soon, Ranking Member Frank Pallone, was the Bipartisan Armenian Protection Act. And this legislation sends a clear message that the United States will not stand by as Armenia faces unprovoked attacks from its neighbor. But we know that this alone is not enough. We have legislation, we have calls to action, but to live up to our commitments as defenders of human rights and promoters of democracy, we have to hold Azerbaijan accountable for its actions in Artsakh. We have the capacity to do this even more through another piece of legislation from our colleague Adam Schiff through the Artsakh Revenue Recovery Act. And so I'm proud to co-sponsor this bill as well because Armenian refugees deserve to be made whole, and the government of Azerbaijan is responsible for their suffering. So, in conclusion, as we continue our work, you have my word that I will remain a steadfast defender of Armenia, a partner of yours, working hand in glove as we advocate for peace. So thank you for the honor of getting to work with you on this important issue, and we will keep going until we have the justice that is deserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Fun fact, Rhode Island was the first state to officially recognize Artsakh's democratic sovereignty in 2012, so always leading the way. Our next member of Congress doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce her anyway. She is a testament to representation. She is a voice of Armenian Americans. She is a co-sponsor and a leader on so many of our legislative issues, and she is the giant whose shoulders that the next generation stands upon. Congresswoman Anna Eshu.
Oh, boy. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So good to see you. Were you in the hearing room yesterday?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, I thought I was going to call you out, but when I looked, you were gone. It was gone. It's wonderful to be with you, and thank you. This is, you know, we come together sometimes to celebrate legislative victories here. And this evening we're marking the 1-year anniversary of what took place in Artsakh after a brutal blockage of just about everything into Artsakh for our people. The Azerbaijanis brought our people to their knees with that blockade. There was a great deal of suffering, when the most vital things that human beings need, medical supplies, school supplies, food, medicines, when you subtract that out of your day-to-day life in a community, there's enormous suffering. So it was brutal, bringing them to their knees, and then guns to their heads and their backs, and 120,000 Armenians fleeing into Armenia. That happened a year ago today. My disappointment is the profound failure of the international community that Azerbaijan was permitted to commit this. This is ethnic cleansing, what has taken place. It's ethnic cleansing, I think, in plain sight with a blatant disregard for international law. And even more troubling is that 1 year later, Azerbaijan has yet to face really any meaningful consequences for its actions. So this impunity, in my view, only deepens the injustice that's being endured by our people. In the aftermath of last year's assault, Speaker Emerita Pelosi and I led 75 House members in urging President Biden to take decisive action to hold Azerbaijan accountable for its crimes. And that's what they are, they're crimes. They're crimes. Our letter called for sanctioning Azerbaijani officials, suspending all U.S. military aid to Azerbaijan, and providing desperately needed humanitarian relief to Artsakh's refugees. To date, USAID has provided approximately $18 million. That does not match the need. That does not match the need. That's an emergency aid. And as I just said, I think it's an insufficient amount given the scale of the crisis. We continue, and you heard this from my colleagues, to press the administration to increase aid for the benefit of this displaced population. And, you know, Armenia is, has many challenges. So to absorb 120,000 people is a real challenge for them. It's a significant challenge for them. I've introduced, and we have many members on it, a bipartisan resolution that condemns Azerbaijan's aggression and calling it for what it is. I think that future generations need to know what we stood up and said. That's what these, the resolutions, and calling this, as I said a moment ago, an act of ethnic cleansing. And the resolution also recognizes that a just peace in the Caucasus requires Azerbaijan to release all wrongfully imprisoned Armenians. And because of the Armenian National Committee, we brought they brought this information right to my office. And much of it was new information that we were not aware of. So if you're wondering what the Armenian National Committee and its members that come to meet with us, what they're doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, this was extraordinarily important information that was brought to members of Congress. And I thank you for it. And we also included in the resolution the right of return. The right of return is an essential part of this for the refugees, and of course the preservation of Armenian, the cultural heritage of Artsakh. Now, being with you this evening, this is a somber evening. It's a somber evening. It is, because with all that's taken place over the years with Azerbaijan, it has not been a pretty picture at all. But the blockade that was visited upon them, and then what they did a year ago today, it was really, in my view, the last straw. So what we do with this is very important. We haven't gotten to where we need to be. And what these resolutions that so many on a bipartisan basis have called for. I'm not going to be here next year. But all these members are going to be. No, don't say that. No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I would stay. 32 years. 32 years. I want you to know that this has, working with you is my own family. Congress that have a conscience, And this undertaking on behalf of our people will be carried forward by them. And the Armenian National Committee is so important in terms of the advocacy. And with that advocacy from the communities across the country, strengthens my colleagues' hands. And so I think at moments like this, our hearts sink and we think, oh my God, what are we going to do? We're not, we take one step forward, one step sideways, another step forward, and then it's 2 steps back because of what takes place. But, we can't be weary. We cannot be weary. Stay strong across the country in our faith and our commitment to our people, wherever they are, most especially, obviously, there. And remember when you do, with the Armenian National Committee, that you strengthen the hand of my colleagues. It's not that they are weak. That's not the point. It's to strengthen their hand in a very large institution of 435 members. And always pray. Our faith has carried us over all that has taken place to our people. I will never forget one of the bishops from New York who I sat next to at a dinner years ago. And I was asking him about his forefathers, because in many of the Eastern Rite churches, the hierarchy is not allowed to marry, but priests do marry. And so I was asking him about that, and he said, yes, my grandfather was a priest, and during the genocide, he said, do you know what they did to him? And I was almost sorry that I asked, because I thought this is good. He said, they nailed him to the door of his church. So, the hatred and what our people have been subjected to, the common denominator is our faith. That's the way it's been for the Armenians. It's the way it's been why the prejudices and the discrimination of the Greeks, of the Assyrians, and so many others. So our faith is central to this. Our faith is central to this. Our faith that we can move, to do the things that are going to assist them for a better life, for a better future. So that baby that's in the picture, has a chance to have a happy and healthy life. So it's been a blessing for me to work with you. You helped bring me to the Congress, and I thank you for that. That has been a great, great privilege, and I'll always be with you. I'll always be with you. I love you all. I thank my colleagues for the work that they have done, and for the gentleman that's sitting in the front row, Frank Malone. He has Frank is responsible for forming the caucus, and the rest is history. I love you all. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for everything. So, our next speaker, I know I spoke about Congresswoman Judy Chu having visited Artsakh. He's someone that's been there 20 times. He is the founding co-chair of the Armenian caucus in Congress. Has been an advocate, steadfast for our cause. But all of those credentials are not what I think of when I think about Congressman Frank Malone. What I think about is when we were in Artsakh, we would have calls on a regular basis with congressional staffers. And there was one person who, you look great, but did not look like a staffer to me. And I had to look in closer, and I was like, is that the congressman? Congressman Frank Pallone would get on these calls himself. He would not delegate it to anybody else, and he would do so because he genuinely, to his core, cares about our people, our cause, and the future of the Armenian nation. Congressman.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try not to talk too long because I see a lot of my colleagues here. But Anna made me think of history. Because one of the things that really disturbs me is, some of you know that I think everybody here is on it, that we have a letter that we've sent to the State Department. But I haven't sent it yet because we're trying to get more co-sponsored. I think everyone here is a co-sponsor. That basically talks about the COPs, the climate conference in Baku, and how we want to use it as an opportunity, the conference, to embarrass, if you will, Azerbaijan, because they're claiming that this is their opportunity to show the world how wonderful they are. In reality, they have all kinds of human rights violations, not only with regard to Armenians and the people of Artsakh, but for their own people, right? They have one of the worst human rights violations records with regard to their own Azerbaijani nationals. Yesterday in the Azeri press, there was a couple articles about myself and Ed Markey leading this letter, and it just went through this whole litany of how there were never any Armenians in Artsakh. The Armenians have no history in Artsakh, and it just galls me because one of the things that I did, I haven't been 20 times, maybe 7 or 8, I did lose track. But galls me is that we know that the Armenian presence in Artsakh is several thousand years old, right? And one of the things I always do when I go is that I want to make sure I go to some of the monasteries to see the history. Dadivan, right, which is what, 900s, 10th century. Gandhazar, which is, 13th century, and the list goes on, right? So anyone, in addition to that, that under the Soviet Constitution, and I know you're going to say this guy's talking about Soviet Constitution, who cares? But under the Soviet Constitution, which is which goes down to the various republics, the republics are supposed to guarantee the autonomy, at a minimum, of the oblasts that are within them, right? And so, whether it's the Russian Federation with what was the war in Chechen, or it's Artsakh surrounded by the Republic of Azerbaijan, or whatever it is, right? There's supposed to be a guarantee for those oblasts within the republic. So whether or not you think, I've always felt that Artsakh should be joined with Armenia, and I'll still take that position. But even if you go by the idea that the republics, have these oblasts or ethnic autonomous regions within, they're supposed to guarantee, and they're denying that it even exists today, right? Today. So it just galls me. But in any case, I will say this: history is long, and we obviously, I feel very strongly that there's a right of return. I don't even want to talk about paying compensation, because there should be a right of return. You should be able to go back, right? And I may not see it. I may not see it, and maybe it's 10, 20, 100 years or whatever, but we're going back, right, is the bottom line. We're going back. And we have to make that clear under both international law as well as various conventions, Geneva Convention, whatever. Now, I don't want to keep talking, but I just want to say a few things. We're going to try to use this opportunity at the COPS convention to say that we want the prisoners of war returned. We want the leaders of Artsakh that are in prison released. And all the other things that my other colleagues mentioned are certainly true about the fact that not only do we need more money for the people who are in Armenia and who need help, but we also want to make sure that that we don't provide any more security assistance, military aid to the Aliyev regime, because they are a dictatorship that are hell-bent on using the military to achieve their goals. And one of those goals, in my opinion, is Armenia itself, right? I mean, you know, we lost Yachevin, we lost Artsakh. They're clearly Aliyev's goal is to take the southern part of Armenia and have a link between the Turkish territory and Azerbaijan. And we have to stand up. I mean, Judy, I think, said it very well. She said, look, what happened, we all warned the State Department that this was going to happen a year ago, right? And I remember my conversation with Blinken where I said, you understand that if you don't take a stand and warn Aliyev that you know, you can't go into to Artsakh and simply use the military means. And he said to me, oh, don't worry, this is like a day or two before the invasion. He said, oh, don't worry, we've already made arrangements and we've got an agreement now that we're going to reopen the Lachin corridor, we're going to reopen the access you know, through Azerbaijan. And literally, I don't know if it was 24 or 40 hours later, they invaded. So, you know, I don't know if it's naivete, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it. The bottom line is the Armenian Caucus is determined to make everyone at the State Department and administration understand that no more weapons, no more help to Azerbaijan that can be used militarily, no sanctions that we'd like to see against the Aliyev regime and the oligarchs, right? And help for Armenia, whether it be military, humanitarian aid, whatever. But the absolute right to return, that has to be the basic idea behind what we're up to. And I know we met with the ANC today. Thank you, so many of you, for going to meet with all of us. You have to keep it up. You have to keep this alive. And you have to make people understand that the future of not only Artsakh, but also of Armenia is at stake. And we have to be strong. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next member of Congress comes from one of the oldest Armenian American communities in the United States. And I've been on the East Coast for a short period of time, but I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right still. I get corrected every time. Worcester? There we go. He's a ranking member of the House Rules Committee, co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and an outspoken advocate for Artsakh and Armenia. Congressman Jim McGovern.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. And it's hard to follow some of the speakers that you've just heard from, including the great leader Frank Pallone and Anna Eshoo and so many others. But I want to thank all of you and everyone here this evening for once again demonstrating the strong bipartisan support Armenian Americans have in Congress. You know, some may not know, but I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts, which is one of the oldest places where Armenian Americans have lived and thrived. The first Armenian church in the Western Hemisphere was built in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1891, the Church of Our Savior. And we did one Armenian festival on Saturday. And the first Armenian evangelical church was also built in Worcester in 1901. So Armenian Americans have always been a strong, welcome, and important part of Worcester and my congressional district. Since my first day in office, they have shared with me their hopes and concerns for central Massachusetts, the nation, and for what the world needs to do to end genocide wherever it is taking place. As was mentioned, I co-chair the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. And the biggest champions for human rights, not just for the Armenian people, but for people all over the world, is the Armenian community here in the United States, and I am so grateful. People have shared with me the histories of their families and their continuing concerns about the situation inside Armenia and surrounding region. And over the past 2 years, Azerbaijan's military invasion and occupation of Nagorno-Karabakh, known as Artsakh, has been particularly painful. It has been horrific. It is important that the United States and the international community work together to hold Azerbaijan accountable for its ethnic cleansing and forced displacement of ethnic Armenians from their homes. And it is important, quite frankly, that we be louder and more forceful in our advocacy, because I believe, like I know all of you believe, that if the United States of America stands for anything, we need to stand out loud and foursquare for human rights. And I am proud. Proud to be an original co-sponsor of many bills to hold Azerbaijan accountable, including the Artsakh Revenue Recovery Act, which will be championed by our colleague from California, Congressman Schiff. But more importantly, I believe each of us needs to be talking about what has happened to ethnic Armenians who were forcibly displaced from their homes. We need to demand that they be compensated for the loss of their livelihoods, homes, businesses, finances. Nothing can truly compensate or make up for losing one's home, losing a way of life. But Azerbaijani assets should be seized and used for the purposes of compensating these Armenians. And we also need to be pressing our leaders to guarantee a just and equitable peace in the region that upholds the sovereignty and dignity of Armenia and guarantees its security from further Azeri aggression. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of you for the kindnesses that you have shown me over the years, for helping to educate me and other members of Congress about the realities that Armenians are facing. I am honored to be able to be here to say a few words, but again, I am and always will be your friend. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next member of Congress represents tens of thousands of Armenian Americans in California, who has been steadfast, consistent, and faithful to the people that have continued to support him, to his community, an advocate of justice, an advocate of Armenia, Congressman Brad Sherman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. It is a pleasure to be with my fellow Californian, Tom McClintock. I know Frank Pallone must still be here. Anna Eshoo, my heart breaks to see her leave Congress, but she will still be with us in so many ways. And Jim McGovern, you should all know of his advocacy for every human rights cause around the globe. We're here today to commemorate and mourn. 1 year after 120,000 and more indigenous Armenians were ethnically cleansed. And when Artsakh's democratically elected political leaders were seized, kidnapped, and remain illegally detained. And I just had a chance to meet with the son of the former president of the Republic of Artsakh. I know that his father is called by some a prisoner of war, but a prisoner of war is an armed man caught in combat. Now, this is a man who fought for human rights back in the days of the Soviet Union, fought for, served in a non-military role for the people of Artsakh, and is now being subject to God knows what level of torture and abuse. I began to focus on what was then the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh back in 1997, when I fought for the first U.S. aid to the people of Artsakh. And I was told, well, that carries with it implicit recognition That was a feature, not a bug. But implicit recognition was not enough. We needed to have made it explicit recognition. We are told that the one time that the borders of Europe have been changed by military action is with regard to the Ukraine. No. It is the invasion of the Republic of Artsakh by the forces of Azerbaijan. In February, I was pleased to partner with the Armenian National Committee to host a congressional briefing with the Republic of Artsakh's human rights defender, Gayem Stefanyan, and who is, I believe, here with us today, and former State Minister Artsakh Larjan. My Armenian is not that good. You'll forgive me. To shed light on the crimes committed by Azerbaijan. In April, I joined my good friend Dina Titus in introducing the Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act, which goes after the 44 Azeri officials most directly responsible for the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh's Armenian population. And gathered with you on many occasions to talk about the recognition of the first genocide of the 20th century. The Ottomans fully understood that the last step of a genocide is genocide denial. You obliterate a people, and then you obliterate the memory of the obliteration. And of course, it is the first step in the next genocide, since it empowers those bent on genocide elsewhere. Well, the last step in ethnic cleansing is the denial of the ethnic cleansing. You expel a people, and then you try to expel the memory that the people ever lived there. Those of us who have on occasion studied ancient history know the real facts. 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, Armenia encompassed more territory than the ANCA would ever dream of claiming. And there wasn't a Turk in sight. And yet we're told that somehow the opposite. Look at the writings of the Parthian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire. And you will see thousands of pages today for thousands of years about their interactions with the Armenian people. You know what you won't see in any of those readings? Turk. For the Romans had not gone to the Atlas Mountains near Mongolia to find people to interact with. Now, one issue I think is very personal, because just yesterday I met with Garhardini and Lana and heard their stories in my office. First, the story of a woman who had the heart-wrenching experience of Azeri airstrikes against her civilian home in Azerbaijan. By Azerbaijan, in Artsakh. And then Lana shared with me the story and the pictures that will haunt me forever of her sister who was captured by Azeri forces, and the horrific footage of her torture and mutilation by Azeri soldiers. The only thing more horrific than those pictures was the knowledge that Azeris put it up on Telegram because they were proud of it. My God. Limbs and fingers cut off, things done to her that I don't want to remember, let alone recount, up on Telegram. I do want to mention a couple things that haven't been mentioned here today. My friend Frank Gaffney was outside and pointed out to me that in November, the COP29 conference is going to be held in Baku. Those of you who follow the environmental movement know that this is the 29th conference to focus on global warming. It'll have thousands of people from all over the world, and for some reason they're going to a place that is known for only two things: the production of fossil fuel and the ethnic cleansing of Armenians. I cannot, as a longtime co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, I cannot think of a worse thing that the environmental movement could do than have COP21 take place in Baku. Have it here in the capital of the United States, the country that we need to mobilize to defeat global warming. The second thing I want to bring to your attention are the comments of David Lammy, the new foreign minister of Britain. I guess he's just learning his new portfolio. For he says, Azerbaijan has been able to liberate territory it lost in the early 1990s. Look, I understand how difficult it is to be a politician, a parliamentarian, and involved in foreign policy all at the same time. But I gotta wonder whether Lammy is ready for prime time. For he obviously is shooting off his mouth about the Caucasus, and I'm not sure he could find them on a map. It is time for the Labour Party to make it very plain that Britain stands by its earlier understanding that the people of Artsakh should be living in Artsakh. I don't think this was a well-considered departure from British policy. I think he just doesn't know what he's talking about. It's time he learns. Maybe if he met with the leaders of the Armenian National Committee and with leaders in Britain of the Armenian community, he will be in a position to know. I, of course, have joined with Adam Schiff on his bill. We need the Artsakh Revenue Recovery Act, both to seize the assets of Azerbaijan and to finance our efforts in Armenia. Now, Armenia faces this 120,000 plus refugees. The whole country is familiar with the big $9 billion, with the huge supplemental foreign aid bill that we passed. Everybody thinks it's about Ukraine and Israel. There's $9 billion of unearmarked humanitarian aid. I got Lincoln to go on the record at a public hearing saying some of that will be spent in Armenia. Now we have to explain how much of it needs to be spent in Armenia. Aliyev well understands that the last refuge of a scoundrel and a dictator, and he at least knows he's a scoundrel and a dictator, is intense fundamentalist nationalism. With that and his oil revenues, he now wants to conquer Armenia. And it's time for America to make it plain that isn't going to happen. Now, I've been involved in foreign policy for a long time, a lot longer than David Lammy. And I learned something, because I fought to have U.S. military aid go to Ukraine before the first invasion of Ukraine. And what Ukraine has learned is you don't expect the American army to show up in Europe. But if you've got the weapons to defend yourself, you can defend yourself. It is time to act now on a massive campaign to arm and train the Armenian military, not so it will win a war, but so that it will prevent a war. And if we don't do that now, we will see not peace, but war in the Caucasus. Because Aliyev's appetite has been whetted. He has ethnically cleansed 120,000 Armenians. He's looking to, as another speaker said, quote, finish the job. So we need civilian aid for Armenia. We need to seize Azeri property in the United States. We need to recognize the true history. We need to commiserate with the victims of these terrible crimes. We need to publicize these crimes. We have to tell the environmental movement they've got to know where they're going. And perhaps most important of all, we need to make sure that Armenia is strong enough that Aliyev goes somewhere, it does something else. Probably won't be any good, but for him to think that he can use his oil revenues and the weapons he acquires to wage war again would be a huge mistake for the world. And thank you for listening to me for so long. I'm Brad Sherman.
Thank you, Congressman Sherman. Our next member of Congress is a powerful voice for the Central Valley Armenian American community. He's been at the forefront of demanding sanctions against Azerbaijan, its war criminals, and calling an end to the destruction of Artsakh's cultural heritage sites. Congressman Tom McClintock.
Thank you for having me here today. Brad Sherman doesn't leave a lot of territory left to cover, and I'm very pleased to endorse the sentiments that he's expressed to you today. It's an honor to be here to mark this sad anniversary. You know, and I think the history of our era is written. One of the more disturbing events will be the subjugation of Artsakh, all but unnoticed by the civilized nations of the world. And while the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Hamas invasion of Israel occupied the attention of world leaders, Artsakh quietly succumbed to strangulation by forces directed and controlled by Azerbaijan. We were aware of what was happening, but preoccupied by all of those other conflicts. The Azerbaijani government knew that and exploited it, and the result was that the life of this democratic republic was snuffed out, and the ethnic Armenians who had built it and maintained it were forced to flee for their lives. All but unnoticed in our time, I believe this tragedy we look back upon as a warning that the civilized nations of the world cannot ignore injustice and conquest and genocide without encouraging more of it and ultimately bringing it upon themselves. I think all of us in the United States government, all of us in Congress, will look back with regret that we focused our attention elsewhere as this tragedy unfolded. This is not the first time such a thing has happened. In the 1930s, the world powers abandoned Poland, distracted and seduced by the realpolitik of its time. Churchill spoke of this in 1939. With these words, he said, "Poland has been again overrun by two of the great powers which held her in bondage for 150 years, but were unable to quench the spirit of the Polish nation. The heroic defense of Warsaw shows that the soul of Poland is indestructible, and that she will rise again like a rock, which may for a spell be submerged by a tidal wave, but which remains a rock." I pray and I believe that will be true of the Republic of Artsakh, and that as events unfold, justice will someday be visited upon this region, both to succor the victims and to punish the guilty. And that like Poland before it, Artsakh will be restored to the community of free and civilized nations of the world. God bless you.
Thank you, Congressman. We're going to go up north now, and we're going to talk about our incredible Congresswoman from Michigan, who is a Congresswoman of conviction, who understands persecution, who has stood with our community, stood with our cause for as long as she's been in Congress. Incredible Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Thank you so much to my incredible Armenian brothers and sisters. So, as you all know, when I first got here, one of the first amazing bills I got to be able to introduce or to be able to vote for was to recognize the genocide. And I was debating whether or not to share this story, but I think it's important. You know, for me, for years, especially I come from Michigan, where, I mean, we have St. John and Southfield. I have, you know, St. Sarkis and Dearborn, very connected, all of us together. And many of the Armenian people were forced displacement and became refugees in Lebanon, and I hear connections in Palestine. I just heard somebody tell me his father grew up in Haifa. So there's always been this amazing connection between the Armenian people and the Palestinian people. So after that vote, of course, you know, I think there was a shock because the Michigan folks knew me, but I think folks around the country, especially my California Armenians, were like, whoa, who's that? Because no one had called me to vote yes or no. I just knew I'm going to vote yes in recognition. And I've never told Frank Pallone this story. So it was around Ramadan, the month of fasting, and I was sitting at some iftar for one of the humanitarian organizations that invited me. And they so happened to put the ambassador of Turkey next to me. I never told Georgie this story either, but they put him next to me, and you know, I didn't think anything of it. Nothing, you know, I'm just, you know, we're about to break fast together, and you know, he said, I just want you to know, like, you know, we always stand with the Palestinian people. And I said, well, thank you, that's wonderful. He goes, but I don't understand. Why, you know, why you voted? It's no genocide. And I said, well, it's because I'm Palestinian. I know ethnic cleansing. I know genocide. I mean, I know it may be controversial to some of my colleagues, but that's how I answered. He was a little shocked. I didn't end up breaking fast. I left after that from there. But you know, I work a lot on various issues, of course, advocacy around a lot of various issues. And you know, this is not against the Turkish people. This is for recognizing injustices, even my own country, and recognizing injustices of indigenous people, Native American people, that we continue to have to recognize those injustices. But the horrific, you know, few years of continued ethnic cleansing, displacement, and continued genocide, and the connections, again, are so strong. I want you all to know, no matter who it is, I will be always consistent and fighting against ethnic cleansing, again, no matter where it happens. And you all give me so much hope. I don't think you realize, I know it took so long, but you did it so beautifully unapologetic, rooted in your faith, your language, your culture, your history. You made sure to continue to humanize, oh my God, Laura's fiance is here, to continue to, you know, humanize the Armenian people, because even with the unbelievable numbers, right? There were people behind it. Meeting a mother who lost her 16-year-old child just recently while she's, you know, again, in shelter. All of that, again, you did it so beautifully, unapologetically, not shying away of your Armenian roots and your culture and your beauty of everything that you all are. Also, please know this, of course, we're going to continue, and I just texted, I got to get on your letter, I just found out about it. But I also want you to know, even in the United States, I want you all to know, you know, even as we fought for MENA category on the census, I know we left Armenian people out. And I want you to know, you know, I've been here 6 years. This is something that I thought, oh my God, we have to do something about it. I'm going to ask my colleagues, we need to do more. I don't want you all counted incorrectly or recognized by your own government here in the United States incorrectly. We know that there are different experiences, lived experiences, no matter if you're Latino, Black, Asian American in our country, and I think the Armenian experience is very different and needs to be recognized in that way. And so, again, thank you for continuing to welcome me always. I always feel incredibly at home, but even when I hear you all fighting for reparations, fighting for right to return, fighting to stop the refugee crisis, again, all I keep thinking about is my ancestors, and again, fighting to also be recognized against those injustices. So thank you so much. And know this, and I'm not saying it because he's here, but Frank Pallone knows a lot. But not only that, no, he actually has a subscription to the, what is it? Because he knows, I went up to him because after what happened to the Armenian priest in Jerusalem, I said, Frank, look what they're doing. And he goes, I already know. I'm subscribed to, he has some newsletter that he gets. And then he reads everything about the Armenian people. So it's amazing because I'm like, what are you reading? It's incredible. So I just want you all to know, he really is sincere about this fight for the people, the Armenian people, and continue to fight, and again, recognizing the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh and so much more. So thank you for always indulging me too, because I know I'm always trying to push a little bit harder, but I know that, I want to move with urgency. They've been waiting decades for justice. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next speaker has, throughout the entirety of his life, especially the course of the last few years, dedicated himself wholly and completely to the people of Artsakh. And I say this because I've seen it with my own eyes. Yegham Stepanyan, who's a human rights defender of the people of Artsakh, was more than just an ombudsman. He was a voice for his people during its darkest days. He was a testament to strength and resilience when we were living through hell. And he is the hope for a better, brighter future for Armenia and Artsakh. One thing I'll say about Yegham, and everybody should know this because he's a humble person and he won't say it himself. What blew me away in my time in Artsakh, after the blockade, after the war, when the entirety of the state structures of Artsakh collapsed, and people were left without any resources, people were left without help, people were left with nowhere to turn, Yegham picked up every single phone call that went to his office. Yegham's employees, Mari, who's here today, took their own cars, drove and visited people one by one to make sure that they're safe. He made sure every single person in Artsakh that needed help got it. So, I want to introduce you, but I want to say thank you on behalf of the Armenian nation. Yegham Stepanyan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us here today. And yeah, it is very difficult for us to speak today because on this very day, a year ago, Azerbaijan attacked peaceful population of Artsakh, and this was the culmination of the genocidal policy of Azerbaijan against the people of Artsakh. And for 24 hours, the bombings and shellings, they didn't stop. Azerbaijan was just targeting everything in Artsakh, cutting all the roads between communities and making people to flee and to find refuge in Stepanakert. I remember very well the streets of Stepanakert, overwhelmed with displaced people, sleeping outside, sleeping in the streets without clothing and without proper food. I was just looking at these photos and thinking that these are not just photos for us. This is our life, which we lived together. This is life under blockade. This is life during wars and during exodus. And everyone in Artsakh, including me, David, Siranush, Marina, Gev, we try to do our best to inform the international community what is going on in Artsakh, with very little hope that with the intervention of international community we can save Artsakh. Because we really believe that the international community once promised Armenian people never again. And we believe that promise. And we thought that by bringing our cause to the attention of international community, we will have their support. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. And an ancient Armenian population, indigenous Armenian population, was uprooted from its ancient homeland. Immediately after the ethnic cleansing or genocide of Artsakh, I was so much disappointed, and I thought that after all I had nothing to do. Under this trauma, I was very frustrated, but then I realized that I do not have right to give up. I do not have right to give up my fight for the immediate release of our POWs and hostages. We do not have right to give up our fight for the preservation of Armenian cultural and religious heritage in Artsakh. We do not have right to give up our right to return. This is the most important thing for me, and I think that for every Artsakhi living in Armenia and worldwide. Everyone, when I just walk around Yerevan, every Artsakhi is asking when we are going back. And I think that I do not have right to leave these people alone. I must continue my fight for the return of Artsakh people to our homeland. And in this matter, we still should rely on your support, on the support of Armenian diaspora, on the support of our friends worldwide. And I just want to say once again, thank you very much for having us here today, and to ensure that personally I will continue my fight, and I expect your support for that fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gevam. When Gevam says that apathy is a luxury that Armenians have never been afforded, he's right. He's right. And it's on us to keep the faith. And there's nobody better that I can ask to close off today's powerful remarks than a man who represents the strength and faith of the Armenian people. Դեր Հովհաննես պիտի հարցնեմ, որ վերջին խոսքերը տակ եւ աղոթքով ագեք այսօր։
Սիրելի ներկաներ, հարգելի կոնգրեսական, ես արցախցի եմ և 33 տարի ծառայել եմ հայ առաքելական եկեղեցու Արցախի թեմում։
Dear attendants and respected Congressman On, I'm Artsakh, and for 33 years I have served in the Armenian Apostolic Church.
Այսօր մենք խոսում ենք երկու երկրի մասին, որը շատ մեզ համար տարօրինակ է։
Today we're speaking about two countries that is very strange to us.
Խոսում ենք Արցախ աշխարհի մասին, որը մի փոքրիկ դրախտավայր է մեր համար։
We're talking about Artsakh, which is a small heaven for us.
Որը ուներ 150,000 բնակչություն,
which had a population of 150,000 Armenians.
Եվ 1311 վանք եւ եկեղեցի։
And 1,311
եւ Ադրբեջանի մասին են խոսում, որը ընդամենը 100 տարվա պատմություն ունի։
And we're talking about Azerbaijan that only has a history of 100 years.
Եվ քանի որ պատմական եւ մշակութային արժեքներ չունի Ադրբեջանը,
And because Azerbaijan does not have any historic or cultural values,
Աստվածաշնչյան օրենքներին դեմ է գնում։
it goes against the rules of the Bible.
Ինչպես գիտենք, Աստվածաշնչի մեջ կա 10 պատվիրան, 10-րդ պատվիրանն ասում է. Արևանի ունեցվածքը մի ցանկացի։
As we know, there are 10 orders in the Bible, and the 10th order in the Bible says that you should not want the property of your neighbor. This is approximate, I'm not going to read this translation.
Բայց իրենք այդ պատվիրանը չգիտեն եւ միշտ ցանկացել են արևանի ունեցվածքը։
But they do not know this order, and they have always wanted what belongs to us.
Եվ այսօր Ադրբեջանը ոչնչացնում է մեր պատմական եւ մշակութային եւ հոգեվոր արժեքները։
And today, Azerbaijan is destructing our historic, cultural values and monuments.
Եվ քանի որ աշխարհը լուր հետևում է դրան, իրենք իրենց ծև գործը ուզում են վերջնակետին հասցնել։
And because the world is following that, they want to finish what they have started.
Ես ուզում եմ մի փոքրիկ պատմություն պատմել 1915 թվականի ցեղասպանությունից։
I want to tell a little story from the 1915 genocide.
Ցեղասպանության ժամանակ մի խումբ հայորդիներ քահանայի հետ միասին գերի են ընկնում թուրքերի ձեռը։
During the genocide, there was a group of Armenians who were held in captivity together with a priest.
Եվ քահանային ստիպում են դավանափող, կրոնափող լինել եւ իր ժողովրդին կրոնափող անել։
And they were forcing the priest to change his religion and change the religion of his people.
Բայց քահանան հորդորում է եւ սկսում աղոթել ու խաչակնկվել իր հայ քրիստոնյաների հետ միասին։
But the priest rejects this and starts praying and crossing together with his crowd.
Թուրք զինվորը գալիս եւ կտրում է քահանայի աջ ձեռքը։
The Turkish soldier comes and cuts the priest's hand off.
Քահանան սկսում է խաչակնկել ձախ ձեռքով եւ ձախ ձեռքն էլ են կտրում։
And he starts crossing with his left hand, and they cut his left hand off too.
Քահանան սկսում է լեզվով խաչակնկել, լեզուն հանում է ու սկսում լեզվով խաչակնկել։
He starts crossing with his tongue, and
Եվ թուրքը քահանայի լեզուն կտրում է։
they cut his tongue off too.
Քահանան սկսում է աչքերով ցույց տալ խաչակնկվել։
And the priest starts making the sign with his eyes.
Եվ թուրքը քահանայի աչքերը հանում է։
And he takes his eyes off too.
Քահանան գլխով է խաչակնկվում, բայց թուրքը քահանայի գլուխը կտրում է։
He starts making the cross with his head, and the Turk beheads him.
Եվ այդ պատիժը չունեցան թուրքերը, քանի որ ցեղասպանություն կատարեցին։
The Turks were not punished because they committed genocide.
Եվ 1992 թվականին թուրքերը ռմբակոծեցին Գանձասարի վանքը, որտեղ գտնվում էի ես որպես վանահայր։
In 1992, the Turks bombed the monastery of Ganzasar, where I was serving as a priest.
Եվ ես փրկվեցի այդտեղ։ 2020 թվականին, երբ որ գտնվում էի դադիվանքում, թուրքերը ուզում էին ինձ գերի տանել կամ վերջում սպանել։
I survived in Ganzasar, and in 2020, when I was a priest in Dadivang, they wanted to take me in captive and.
Եվ դա իրենց չհաջողվեց, իսկ 2023 թվականի սեպտեմբերի 19-ին, երբ որ պատերազմը սկսվեց, ես գտնվում էի իմ սեփական տան մեջ։
They did not succeed in that, and in 2023, when the war started, I was in my own house.
Ես դուրս եկա բակ, հեռախոսով, որ կապում եմ տղաների հետ, տեսնեմ, որտեղից են հարձակվել ազերիները։
I got outside to get in contact with men and see where the Azeris have attacked.
Թուրք ազերիները նշմարում են իմ տեղը եւ երբ որ մտնում եմ տուն, մի քանի վայրկյան հետո հրթիռը իմ հետևից մտնում է իմ տուն։
The Azeris targeted me, and once I entered the house, a few moments later, they bombed my house. Yeah.
Արդյունքում երկու մարդ զոհվում է իմ տանը եւ 4 հոգի վիրավորվում։ Այդ թվում նաեւ ես ծանր վիրավորվում եմ։
As a result of this, 2 people were killed and 4 people were heavily wounded, including me.
Եվ 1 ժամ անց ադրբեջանական բոլոր լրատվամիջոցները եւ հեռուստատեսությունը հրճվանքով ասում է. Եվս 1 հոգեվորական քրիստոնյա terrorist ոչնչացրինք։
After an hour, the entire Azeri media was announcing in excitement that they have killed yet another religious Christian priest. Terrorist.
Եթե 1915 թվականի ցեղասպանությունը ամբողջ աշխարհը ճանաչեր, այսօր հերթական ցեղասպանություն չէր լինի նաև Արցախում։
If the entire world would have recognized the 1915 Armenian genocide, today there would have not been another one happening.
Եվ եթե այսօր Արցախի ցեղասպանությունը չճանաչենք, հերթական ցեղասպանություն կլինի աշխարհի մյուս երկրներում։
And if we do not recognize the Artsakh genocide today, there are going to be more to follow.
Ցավով կարող եմ արձանագրել, որ 290 օր արցախցիները գտնվում էին բլոկադայի մեջ եւ ամբողջ աշխարհը գիտեր դրա մասին եւ լուր սպասում էր, թե ինչպես է սովամահ լինում Արցախի երեխան։
I want to state that for 290 days, Artsakh was blockaded and the entire world was seeing how Artsakh children were starving.
Եկեք իրերը իրենց անունով կոչենք։
Let's call things by their names.
Եվ ես այսօր եկել եմ այստեղ իմ ձայնը բարձրացնելու Ամերիկայի Միացյալ Նահանգների բեմահարթակներից եւ ամբողջ աշխարհին կոչ անելու, որ բռնեն Ադրբեջանի արյունոտ ձեռքը, որ այլևս ցեղասպանություն չլինի։
Today I'm here to raise my voice from the stages of the United States to the entire world so that they make sure that they stop the bloody hand of Azerbaijan.
Այսօր մենք չգիտենք, թե ինչպես են վերաբերվում մեր եկեղեցիների, մեր վանքերի եւ մեր երեզմաների հետ։
Today we do not know how they're treating our churches, monasteries, graves.
Ադրբեջանը խախտել է մարդկային եւ ռազմական բոլոր օրենքները։
Azerbaijan has broken all the rules of humanity and military rules too.
Զոհվածների խոշտանգումը, նույնիսկ զոհված զինվորի վրա եթե դաջված է եղել խաչել, ապա այն դանակով կտրել հեռացրել են։
They've been torturing the dead soldiers, and sometimes even when there were crosses as like tattoos on their bodies, they also cut the tattoos off their bodies.
Մի խոսքով Ադրբեջանը պատերազմում է ոչ թե Արցախահայության հետ, այլ նաև մշակութային հոգևոր արժեքների դեմ։
In short, Azerbaijan is not only fighting against the people of Artsakh, but also against the cultural and religious values that we have.
Սիրելի ներկաներ, ես վստահ ասում եմ, որ արդարությունը կբարձրացնի մի ազգ, բայց մեղքը անարգանք է ժողովուրդներին, ինչպես որ Աստվածաշնչի մեջ է գրված, Առակաց գրքում։
Dear attendees, I want to confidently state that justice will be voiced by
Կբարձրացնի մի ազգ, բայց մեղքը անարգանք է ժողովուրդներին։
Yes, I'm having a hard time. I want to say that justice will be stated by individuals, but like sins are not respected by people, something along those lines. I'm just not good at this religion lines.
Առակաց գրքի 17-րդ գլխի 34 համարն Սիրելի ներկաներ, ես վստահ եմ, որ բոլորս էլ սիրում ենք արդարություն։ Ճշմարտությունը եւ արդարությունը պետք է վեր հառնի։ Պետք է իրերը կոչենք իրենց անուններով։ Սևին ասենք սև, սպիտակին ասենք սպիտակ։ Բայց թուրք ադրբեջանցիները այդ գույները խախտել են։ Աշխարհի վրա այդ գույները խախտել են։ Եվ պետք է մենք իրենց ցույց տանք, որ սևը սև է, սպիտակը սպիտակ։
Dear attendees, we all love justice here, and we should make sure that justice is recovered, and we need to start calling things by their names, but Azerbaijan has mixed the black and the white with each other, and we need to make sure that Azerbaijan knows that this cannot happen in the world.
Շնորհակալություն եմ հայտնում ձեզնից, որ ժամանակ տրամադրեցիք լսելու ինձ։
I want to thank you for dedicating your time to listen to me.
Եվ խնդրում եմ ոտքի կանգնել ձեզ օգնելու համար։
And I want to ask you to stand up to be blessed.
Օրհնյալ Տեր մեր Հիսուս Քրիստոս ամեն, Հայր մեր, որ հերկինս ես, Սուրբ Եղեցյանուն քո, եկես արքայություն քո, եղեցին կամ քո, որպես հերկինս եւ հերգրին, ըսած մեր հանապազոր, տուր մեզ այսօր, եւ թող մեզ սպարտիս մեր, որպես եմեք թողունք մերոց պարտաբանած, եւ մի դաներս մեզ ի փորձություն, այլ փրկյաց մեզ իչարե, զիքոյ արքայություն եւ զորություն եւ փառք հավիտյանս ամեն, պահպանիչ եւ հույս հավատացելոց Քրիստոս Աստված մեր, պահյա, պահպանյա եւ օրհնյա, զառաջիկացյալ ժողովուրդս, ընթովանյալ սուբհեպատվական խաչույթքոյ խաղության, հրգերևելի եւ աներևույթ թշնամույն, արժանավորյա գողության փառավորելս քեզ ընթոր եւ օգուտ ծրփո, այժմ եմ միշտ եւ հավիտյանս հավիտենից ամեն, օրհնյալ եղերուք, իշնորհած ու փոքվույն, երթայքի խաղաղություն, եւ Տեր Հիսուս Քրիստոս եղեցին ձեզ, ընդամենես յանսը, ամեն։ Շնորհակալություն։
On behalf of the entire team at the ANCA, all our local advocates, community leaders, I want to thank you all. I want to encourage you all to please check out this incredible exhibit. Photographer David Gharamanyan, who's in Artsakh during the war and the blockade, who documented so many of this, that Hamas Gain has brought out. Please take a second to give that a look. Feel free to grab some food. Most importantly, interact with each other.